You see, you can look for mine that way. Yeah. That's, I
Racing
think,
on my page
right.
10. Okay.
I don't think I read that this time, but I've done that one at other readings. I don't think I read that here at KSPS, but that's also a running poem, which was a birth a birthday poem. Yeah. See, here is another birthday. So yeah, but that was true. The race literally was on the October of his birthday, and of course he was in grad school by then. Yes, he was,
Mm-hmm.
but he was the runner in our family, and so it's kind of the way that I got into it. Although I don't think I would have really started. But yeah, those two things come: the experience of actually being in that race at Paint Lick, Kentucky. Um, that I say, yeah, the Paint Lick fire engine, paces me. The other thing that came together here is that race. I thought about whether I should try to get this in here explicitly, but it felt like overkill. But
Mm-hmm.
you know how they'll name, like they'll say, "Race for the Cure" is the name of a 5K.
Mm-hmm.
This race was actually called Run for the Sun, SON, and I think it was a religious feeling, right? Well, and it was my son's birthday. So I was running for, that's why the first line, I run this day for you, my lovely lanky son, because he was in my mind. It was a
Mm-hmm.
run for the sun, yeah. But again, it felt like to try to get that in and explain it I didn't need it, so
Yeah.
it's a backstory
That's
that.
something I struggle with in my writing too, is that I want to jam every single thing that
Mhm.
I think, and um, gosh, if I had that opportunity, if something like that happened to me, there's no way that wouldn't be the title. Like,
Mhm.
I can't
Mhm.
resist it. So I think
Yeah.
that shows a lot of restraint too, like, because there's so many, like, I'm trying to think, if you have a whole bunch of candy for Halloween, you might want to throw in, the hard candies that nobody will want, just to have
Mhm.
more in the bowl.
That's a great image. That's a great
But
image. Or Halloween candy. Yeah, well, I don't know if I think I probably early I might have tried to say it, but then again, it felt like if I was going to have to explain, because that my poem was about my son, and it
hmm
was triggered by the title of this. But that really, it's kind of like you write it out and then you say, what's the heart of this? What's central here, and then you begin building from that. But yes, you're right, and I think getting feedback also helps, because I do think that we all we want to be sure readers understand,
yeah,
so we tend to over explain, because we've all been also frustrated though when something's there that is truly incomprehensible. You just can't figure it out at all, and then
hmm
you feel kind of the reader
yeah,
feels frustrated, so you don't want that. So you'll tell more. So it helps to have someone who says, this, it is there already, you don't need to say this,
yeah.
or this is taking you away from what's central in the poem.
And then another question that I had that um, I really wanted to ask was the poem "Learn to Be a Rock" and "Above the Eastern
Oh yes,
Treetops Blue."
yes.
It reminded me so much of my favorite song ever, "I Am a Rock" by Simon and
Ah,
Garfunkel, because it has that
that's right, I
same,
remember you said that.
yeah, it has the same sense of like, how did I phrase it? Solidarity and control.
Hmm.
And I was wondering, um,
Mhm.
do you use, you talked about photography, and I'm sure that
Mhm.
that inspires your writing as well, but do you use outside art, like pictures, and you could think of nature as art, and you have some allusions to other writers in one of these.
Yes, I think
Mary
that
Oliver?
Mary Oliver. Do you know her poetry, by the way?
I do not.
Okay, she writes very movingly about being in nature. I mean, she
Okay.
spends all her time there, so that really was a nice connection. And the italicized lines in that poem are lines out of her poems, you see. So I'm kind of writing between her lines there. I'm building off her poem. So
Mhm.
that would be an example where it wasn't just one poem. I was reading a collection of her poems. So those are lines from some different poems, but I was taking her lines, but I was really telling my story there
Mhm.
because it really was what I was noticing and thinking about, but then letting her be a part of that. So it's kind of a dialogue, I guess. Um, the short answer here is that I don't even know that song, and
Oh
I love
no.
Simon and Garfunkel. I'm going to have to look it up.
So good.
So, no, that the poem was triggered on a different workshop exercise where the prompt was learn to be, so
Okay,
kind of like the
similar. Yeah.
KSPS, but that one was just learning.
Learning.
This one, it was really important that it was learn to be, and I just came up with rock, and then it was sort of, well, okay, what could a rock teach me and expressed? And I think I wrote that in the mountains. I think I was around mountains at that time. So I think that was influenced by that. No, so music is probably less, I mean, specific music um, isn't as much of a prompt for me. So, for instance, I actually don't like writing while music is playing. And I think it's because I try in all my writing to listen to the voice of the words, to listen to the sounds. The sounds as a kind of subtext,
Mhm.
are the sounds fluid? Are they harsh? Are they what's coming naturally here? And then what kind of sound do I want in the language? And music gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
I've known many people who love music as a prompt, whether it's a specific song or just the way the music sounds, and I can try it as an exercise, but it's not what I would go to
Mhm.
by myself. I need to let the music of the language play in my head or read aloud, hear words, to make the music out of them. Art specifically, again, I've written, I think I've done a little, I mean, I've again done it as an exercise. Did you know there's a name for poems that are written from a work of art?
Give me a hint. I think I know.
It begins with an E, and it's an odd,
Epigraph.
no,
No?
that's close though. It's ephrastic.
Ephrastic.
I'm not
Okay.
sure I could spell it accurately right now, but it's like
R-A-S.
EPHRASTIC, if
Frast.
ephrastic, where its PH is ephrastic. I think that might be right. But yeah, where you would take, like, that's a photograph of mine, where you would, if you looked at that and you just said, and now in some ways, so I went to one of the art curators at the Singletary up in Lexington, did an interesting exercise because often when people see an image, they use the subject of the photograph or the painting to write about. But what she suggested was that you look at like the movement of it, the energy of it, and then try to write, not like, so you would look at this and write not about waves, but you would write something where the language seemed both flowing and interrupted. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So that interests me because that's like you're translating the visual into something, and the subject could be anything, you know.
So using the visual feeling to create the
The
literary feeling.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yes, that's right. So again, it's not the subject. I mean, if it were, where do I don't know if I have anything really literal around here, but like if you looked at this image, so you could write about a horse or a farmer, or a barn. Those are the subjects here. But what if instead you looked at the connection here, and maybe wrote a poem in which two different creatures were connected, or you looked at the kind of the outward vision, and so you wrote something about looking outward, or you thought about the emotional field. This is a very grounded image, and so you wrote about something which is like the rock is very grounded. Do you follow
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you don't take it as just the literal subject here, but you use some of the elements, either the composition or the energy of the image, to do some writing. And that interests me a lot more. Although, again, I don't do it all that often.
Yeah.
I'm much more likely to be triggered by a line that comes to me as a starting point, or that'll show up somewhere, or an image, just the image. And sometimes an insight, but then it's a question of how is that going to get literal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really write about aha movements. Nobody wants a lecture, right?
Yeah.
So it's how is it going to get literal. Oh, by the way, and I know I don't want to take too much of your time, but just one small thing, and I can see how in Balance of Five, if you go to the part, the 2-page, or one where afterbirth is. Do you have that one marked?
I do not.
Because that's one that I read at
31.
Okay.
Oh,
I
did
think
have
when we were designing this, it was rare in this book that we put 2 poems by the same poet together. We usually tried to do one in one, but we didn't want to separate these. And I think I felt that because this one I had said for my father, that people would read this as also for my father. So I didn't actually have that dedication.
Okay.
This has been published in an anthology, and in that anthology it did say for my father. So I can see, but you're quite what you're noticing helps me to see, because it is true. I mean, this was my first and so far only personal experience with accompanying death. And it did strike me as being very much like a birth. And so that metaphor came to me for this, but it helps me, you're thinking that it could have been the death of the son, in the same way that I have poems about the birth of the son. That's actually really interesting, because in a way, I mean, the notion of growing up, going off, it is a kind of loss. So it makes sense on an emotional level, although literally, well, the truth of the poem, is that it was for my father. And the other one said, I think I just didn't really want to repeat that again right there, because it was maybe I should have said, 2 poems for my father and then had them that way, but that would have been awkward too. So here this works the reverse, the idea that it is a metaphor of birth, that is birthing the death. You see, I think that becomes more powerful if we see the speaker as speaking to the one who gave her life in this case, rather than that other way. But your observation makes a really interesting connection for me.
And I think it works both ways as well, because I think one of the things that led me to think that too, I should have paid more attention to, like, the fact that they were placed together, and there has to be a purpose for that, and I probably would have gotten it. But also the fact that especially Tina Parker's work, it focuses so heavily on like motherhood, and then like the imagery that I was getting from this book, where I asked if your son was in the army, moving away, things like that.